Hello, and welcome to part 4 of the Access Chiefs of Staff. And this time, I'm going off on one. I really am, because I am talking about Wilhelm Canaris, who was not a Chief of Staff. He was not anything, really. He was an intelligence officer. He was Chief of the Adware, and this is the total slide I'm producing about him, because I tried to produce slides like I produced for the other officers, for the chiefs of staff and all they've done, and it didn't work for him. And I've read about 3 or 4 books about him now. I've done a whole review of Michael Mueller's one, which is pretty much my favourite of the ones to go and read. And I realised very quickly that as illustrative as Wilhelm is of what happens to officers in Germany and why they support what they do and why they do what they do, as much as he illustrates the mold, he doesn't fit the mold. He is an officer who's sent by Hitler to use his contacts in Spain to get the Spanish to join the war on the German side. We don't know what happens in the meetings. All we do know is the Spanish don't join the war. Hitler is annoyed, but doesn't order his immediate execution or anything. And after the war, Franco orders and makes sure the government pays Canaris' widow a pension. The man is a spy master. That is what he is. And his biggest foe was probably Reinhard Heydrich, who also sort of considered him a bit of a friend, or maybe a frenemy. And he describes him as a wily old fox that should never be underestimated to his team. Could well be apocryphal, but certainly was there. We know Canaris had standing arguments with various generals and other officers about what the army, etc., was involved in terms of the final solution in its various forms. And so many of them said, well, we're doing it on Hitler's orders, it's Hitler's plans, we are just following orders. And he told them they would be held responsible. They didn't believe they would. He, of course, was right. I'm not sure if that was any comfort to him, considering he was executed before the war was over for treason. Because eventually, finally, they managed to find some proof of one of the many, many plots he seems to be involved in to either limit the power of Hitler or get rid of Hitler. This is despite him starting off, in theory at least, as being your average naval Nazi convert, your average Prussianist officer looking for stability, looking for some safe place from the nightmare they're seeing in front of them in the Soviet Union, the issues that have happened to the fleet, the left-wing politicians who stabbed the armed forces in the back at the end of World War I. All these things are there. All these things are part of him. And yet, in many ways, the spy master, and this is something which intrigues me most, retains more of his soul more of his humanity than many of the others. And trust me, he is no choir boy. He is no saint. He is not a good person. Do not go away from this thinking that Canaris is this forgotten spiritual soul in Nazi Germany who somehow rises above and maintains a white glow and a halo on the thing. No. And you don't want to cross him. I am fairly certain that a lot of Heinrich's various agents who had accidental ends in Germany and outside might well have had those ends found caused by the work of Canaris. Half the time he seems to be going to Spain during World War II, it's to talk with the British MI6. He has more contacts around the world in the various other intelligence agencies than anyone really wants to get involved with. Would you call him a double agent? No. He's always a patriot for Germany. His contacts with MI6, the question he's asking, without Hitler, what are the requirements for peace? Requirements are set as unconditional surrender. That is what Germany is required for peace. Unconditional surrender. The achievements of Germany in many parts at the beginning of World War II are down to the work of this man. The information he gathers and produces through his networks of agents is second to none. You talk about Blitzkrieg as a lightning war, as this sort of triumph of mechanization and air power being united to overwhelm at speed your opponents, but you can only make great leaps into the dark if you're fairly certain where you're going to land. This is the man who sometimes goes out into the dark himself to work this out, but sends and coordinates the people who go. And he is as complicated as you can honestly imagine such a person will be. He has a fairly average intelligence officer's career of the pre-World War I German Navy. He'd been born in 1887. Son of Clarke Canaris, a wealthy industrialist. Perhaps showing the romantic side of his nature. He believed his family was related to the 19th century Greek admiral and politician Constantinos Canaris. I have no idea about the truth of this. I think it would require a lot of work to figure it out. I also have to say I find the fact that that's repeated in about 2 different books to be quite an interesting one, but it does show the style of books which were written about Canaris. They do seem to be, what would I say, far more journalistic style than academic style, in that they include these personal touches. At the age of 18, he joined the Imperial Navy, and by the outbreak of the First World War, was serving as an intelligence officer aboard the Dresden. It has often been postulated that it was the evasion tactics which Canaris advised on that enabled the Dresden to evade the Royal Navy for as long as it did after the Battle of Falklands, etc. Who knows? What we do know is that whilst most of the crew are interned in Chile in March 1915, Canaris managed to escape thanks to his fluency in Spanish and manages to get all the way back to Germany by October 1915, which is a feat. On the way, he manages to visit several ports, including Plymouth, UK. At which point, German naval intelligence decided this is a very good officer. And so he's given intelligence work. He's sent to the Mediterranean to help establish intelligence operations. It starts off in Spain, Madrid specifically. He's tasked with establishing a supply service for U-boats and for reconnaissance of any shipping movements. He does okay, but he is then assigned to the Inspector of Submarines in 1916 and does training for duty as a U-boat commander and graduates in September 1917. He ended the war as a U-boat commander in the Mediterranean and was credited with a number of sinkings and even came to the attention of the Kaiser as a result of his exploits. He's awarded an Iron Cross First Class for his exploits in Spain. He is very successful, and he's very, very well. He's not bilingual. He's not even trilingual. He's not quadrilingual. He's not. I'm trying to remember what the 5 is, but he's hexolingual. He can speak 6 languages fluently, including English and Spanish. During the German Revolution of 1918-19, Canaris organizes a formation of Free Corps, paramilitary units, and manages to help suppress communist revolutionary movements. And he's a member of the military court that tried and executed Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg for their involvement in the Spartacist uprising. And he's then appointed to the agency of the defense minister, Gustav Nusk. Now you have to remember, he comes from a rich family. He marries, Erika Wag, who's also the child of some wealthy industrialists, and they have 2 children together. In 1924, he's sent to Japan to supervise the U-boat construction program. That's in purpose of that is program that's in process over there and violating the Treaty of Versailles. And this is what the Canaris is like. When Adolf Senker, the Vice Admiral in charge, shelves because he's trying to make a more favourable cooperative relationship with Britain, Canaris decides that, frankly, yes, that's a good idea, but you should always have backups. And working with German shipping magnates, Spanish merchants, other German industrialists, Argentinian venture capitalists, and the Spanish Navy all manages to continue the activities. Unfortunately, he's another suffer in the Liebernick affair. Remember, when I spoke about Reda, he gets appointed to his post because not that the German Navy is running a film company to get around the treaty obligations and restrictions, but they managed to make it go bankrupt. Well, Canaris is also, because he's tangentially connected, is also subject to that and is, to an extent, tarnished by it. And this is when he is sent to Wilhelm, let's say. Wilhelm. And in this new post, Canaris managed to discover that Wilhelm's, the gentleman who'd been running the Liebernicht film studios, cost up to 26 billion, that is, billion with a B, marks in total losses. As a result, in 1928, Canaris is removed from his intelligence post and takes 2 years of conventional naval service aboard the Schlesien, the pre-Dreadnought battleship, becoming captain of the vessel in 1932. And it's roughly about this period that Canaris discovers Nazism. He's then sent off after this time on the pre-Dreadnought. He's sent off to Schweinmund, the fortress, and probably thinks that his career is going to be over and he's going off to provincial exile. However, the then Abwehr chief, Captain Konrad Pirsig, is forced to resign because he's having so many arguments with Reinhard Heydrich. Hey, it's useful sometimes having someone who is an annoyance in the chain of command. And the trouble is, Rader is given a choice. He can either put Canaris in the post, who he's not that keen on because he's a bit of an odd fish, and not really one of his men, but closer to his men than some of the other options, or an army officer, or Reinhard Heydrich might take it all over. Well, Rader and me would agree on one thing. The only thing worse than not having an intelligence service would be having one run by Reinhard Heydrich, because he's not the smartest cookie out of the fridge, and he's certainly not the most subtle. And so Canaris gets called back. And this is where Canaris begins his development of intelligence. And he's slowly promoted up as the Abwehr takes on more and more responsibilities for not just finding out information, but denying information. There is one word which is Russian, maskirovka, which is made famous by, well, Red Storm Rising, to be precise. And the idea that you can run an operation as such a complicated camouflaging intelligence operation that it covers what you're doing and no one realizes what you're doing. You're mystifying your enemy. Well, that is what Canaris is put in charge of doing. The level of disinformation available is what he does. He parks himself in the square yard of real estate that is Neville Chamberlain's brain for quite a lot of the last 1930s. There is a whole Dutch airfield scare where the British are worried that the Germans will seize Dutch airfields and launch bomber raids, heavy bomber raids, from the Netherlands to attack Britain. What's interesting is all these stories are coming through. Good boy. Come. Good boy. Good boy. I know. Come. Good boy. What's interesting is all these stories are coming through, but the Germans don't have heavy bombers. The Germans don't even have airliners of suitable numbers or size that you could quickly convert into heavy bombers. And the idea you can quickly convert an airliner into a heavy bomber is someone who is put forward by someone who doesn't understand anything about longitudinal and latitudinal framing in aircraft design, and the fact you can't just cut out a huge section of airframe and then balance a whole load of weight in the middle of it. Oh, and add in bomb bay doors. You're going to need to do a lot of work to an airframe. And believe it or not, the airframes of the 1930s are not exactly designed for that much rejigging. So, despite British intelligence, naval intelligence, and army intelligence all saying it's very, very unlikely, Royal Air Force intelligence saying, well, we need more money for fighters. If this means we need a lot more money for fighters. And the Army and Navy looking around and going, but you said we don't need fighters for the last few years, that the bomb will always get through, and that's why you're building bombers. We need money for fighters. It's been chronically mismanaged and underfunded by previous governments. You haven't been asking for money for fighters, At which point someone turns around into them and goes, okay, so basically you're covering your butts. Yes. Well, that is all Canaris. Numerous operations throughout World War II are Canaris. We often talk about the idea of speaking truth to power. And the vision is often that it will be some pure, some undoubtedly good individual speaking truth to something evil. The reality is probably not. It's going to be someone who's probably pretty deadly in their own way, and therefore not be as a shining beacon of light and hope as you might wish. Well, Canaris speaks truth to power. It gets him into trouble with Hitler on several occasions. It gets him into trouble with several Hitler's subordinates, but he speaks truth to power. And he's worth studying. As I said, there is a book review coming out about Canaris as the Muller book, and he is worth thinking about. Anyway, let's consider what else we've got coming up. Well, when this comes out, which will be on the 13th of September, we are looking forward to Karl Donitz on his birthday. And we're looking forward to Questions Till the Brew runs out on 19th September. Those will be good. They will be good. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and take care. And that is next, Arturo Riccardi. That'll be part 5.